This audio overview was generated using AI for educational purposes by Carey Family Dental and does not replace a consultation with your dentist. So today we are taking a deep dive into something that honestly just blew my mind. We are looking at airway dysfunction and sleep disordered breathing, or SDB, in kids.
Right, yeah, it's a huge topic.
Yeah, and our mission here is to really understand how a simple lack of oxygen at night can completely alter a child's physical and cognitive development. I mean, think of a child's breathing like a computer's operating system.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right, because if it's constantly buffering in the background, then every other program you try to run, whether that's physical growth, immune response, or even behavior, just crashes or slows way down.
Exactly, yeah. Because, a hardware overheating issue eventually damages the whole motherboard. When a growing kid isn't getting the oxygen they need, their entire system has to compensate. And that is exactly where we see those system glitches pop up.
But it's not always obvious, is it? It's not just a stereotypical loud snoring issue.
No, not at all. Actually, they rarely look like that. The clues are usually way more subtle.
Yeah, that's what surprised me in the sources. Because if you're a parent, you might just notice things like chronically chapped lips or dark circles under their eyes. Or maybe they just have an open resting mouth posture.
Right, or at night it could be bedwetting or teeth grinding. Or even just waking up in a completely tangled mess of bed sheets.
Wait, the bed sheets? Disheveled sheets are a symptom.
Definitely. Those tangled sheets are a massive red flag.
Seriously, I just thought that was, an active dreamer.
Well, that's what a lot of people think. But that is actually a child whose brain is repeatedly waking them up just enough to physically move their body. They are desperately trying to open up a collapsed airway.
Wow. Okay, wait. I want to pause on the behavioral side for a second because this is wild. We are so quick to label a hyperactive kid with ADHD, right? Or we assume they're just acting out because of a phase.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Are you saying we might just be misdiagnosing a child who's literally exhausted from fighting to breathe all night?
Yes, absolutely. And the mechanism behind it is really fascinating.
How does that actually work?
Well, when the body has to fight for oxygen, the brain never truly enters that deep, restorative delta wave sleep. It just gets trapped in this mild, sympathetic fight-or-flight state.
So they're basically stressed out all night.
Exactly. So that daytime hyperactivity or the delayed cognitive development or even poor focus in school, that is just a severely exhausted brain pumping out adrenaline to keep itself awake.
That is incredible. But okay, if the core issue is oxygen starvation in the brain, why are dentists the ones leading the charge on this?
I mean, it's a fair question. But it all traces back to the physical shape of the mouth. The oral cavity is literally the structural gateway to the airway.
Right, because when we look at root causes, it's things like prolonged thumb sucking or pacifier use, right?
Exactly. And those aren't just bad habits. They actually physically push the upper palate upward, which narrows the dental arch.
And since the roof of the mouth is the floor of the nasal cavity, pushing it up just shrinks the nasal airway.
Right. And then you add in things like tongue or lip ties, maybe enlarged tonsils or chronic allergies, and suddenly you get severe nasal obstruction.
Which forces them to breathe through their mouths. It makes me think of the tongue and the breath as like a sculptor's tool.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, because if a kid is constantly mouth breathing, the tongue drops down, right? So those tools aren't shaping the inside of the jaw correctly. It leaves the upper palate narrow, and then there's absolutely no room for adult teeth to come in properly later.
That is a great visualization.
Yeah.
I would just add that the lack of proper muscle tone actually redirects the facial growth downward rather than forward.
Downward? Wait, really?
Yeah. If the tongue isn't resting against the roof of the mouth to naturally widen the upper jaw, the airway just remains structurally narrow. It traps the child in this self-perpetuating cycle.
Because the poor breathing compromises skeletal growth, which then makes breathing even harder.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle.
Okay, so knowing how severe that cycle is, that it literally changes the shape of a child's face and brain function, how do we actually patch this operating system glitch?
Well, it starts with comprehensive diagnostics. You have to go way beyond just looking at teeth.
Like using sleep questionnaires and physical airway assessments?
Right, and high-resolution pulse oximetry to track the exact oxygen drops during sleep. From there, the management really has to be multidisciplinary.
So you aren't just handing them a mouth guard and sending them on their way?
Definitely not. The non-surgical side involves things like myofunctional therapy.
Which is basically physical therapy for the mouth, right? to strengthen the tongue and facial muscles so they rest properly.
Exactly. Plus, we use guided growth appliances. They act like a gentle scaffold to physically widen the palate as the child grows.
So you're creating permanent space for the airway above it.
Yes, but sometimes, surgical intervention is the only way to clear the path, like releasing a tongue tie or removing enlarged tonsils that act as physical roadblocks. You really have to look at the whole picture.
Right, connecting sleep hygiene, jaw development, and airway anatomy. It fundamentally changes how you look at a sleeping child.
It really does.
It leaves me with this thought for you listening. If the simple act of breathing shapes a child's jaw structure, cognitive development, and ability to focus, how much of our basic adult health and facial structure was secretly determined by how well we slept when we were 5?